Eleanor Vance, a name synonymous with elegance and philanthropy. But what happens when the woman, who everyone trusts, is hiding a dark secret? Today, we're diving into a world of lavish parties and hidden truths. Eleanor's best friend, Sarah, is about to stumble upon a shocking reality that could shatter their world, a truth that will force her to question everything she thought she knew about loyalty and friendship, a secret that could bring down the pillars of their social circle. So why did Sarah's discovery lead to such dramatic consequences? How did this revelation turn their privileged world upside down? And what ripple effects did it have on their lives? Stay tuned to find out, and before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if this story of difficult choices and betrayals resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The air in the grand ballroom shimmered with anticipation. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow on the elegantly dressed guests, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a live jazz band. It was the annual Heart of Gold charity auction, and as always, it was the most coveted event of the social season in the upscale community of Oakwood. Tonight, however, was different. There was a subtle tension underneath the surface of champagne flutes, clinking and hushed conversations. At the center of it all stood Eleanor Vance, the evening's hostess. Eleanor, with her radiant smile and perfectly coiffed blonde hair, was the epitome of grace and generosity. She moved through the room with an effortless charm, her designer gown shimmering under the lights. By her side, as always, was her best friend, Sarah, equally polished, though with a quieter, more watchful demeanor. Sarah's dress, a sleek emerald green, was a gift from Eleanor, a token of their long and seemingly unshakable bond. Sarah's gaze drifted over the crowd. She knew most of these faces, the who's who of Oakwood's elite. There were the usual suspects, the old money families, the self-made millionaires, the up-and-coming social climbers, all vying for a piece of the spotlight. Sarah had been part of this world for as long as she could remember, a world of private schools, summer homes, and endless charity events. It was a world that Eleanor had helped her navigate, especially after Sarah's father had passed away, leaving her with just a small inheritance and her mother struggling to keep afloat. Eleanor had been her constant, her rock. She had pulled Sarah into her world, showering her with beautiful clothes, invitations to exclusive parties, and a sense of belonging that Sarah had craved. Eleanor was also her benefactor. She had invested in Sarah's small art gallery, a passion project that Sarah wouldn't have been able to pursue without her support. Eleanor believed in Sarah's talent, and more than that, in Sarah. They were more than just best friends. They were family. As the evening progressed, the auction began, with Eleanor as the star of the show. She had a natural gift for captivating the audience. Her voice was a soothing melody as she presented each item. A rare vintage car, a week-long stay at a luxurious villa in Italy, and a signed artwork by a renowned sculptor, one that Sarah herself had helped Eleanor select for this auction. The bidding was fierce, with paddles rising rapidly in the air, the room buzzing with excitement. But underneath the glamorous surface, a nagging doubt had started to fester in Sarah's mind. For months, she had noticed subtle inconsistencies and strange details, a disconnect between the Eleanor she saw on the surface and a different one that would occasionally appear when she thought that no one was watching. Sarah tried to ignore it at first, but the uneasy feeling kept growing, like a persistent itch, one that she couldn't scratch. It all started with the sudden change in Eleanor's finances. Just a few months ago, Eleanor's husband, Richard, a seemingly successful businessman, had been in the middle of a big lawsuit. He had been working to settle, and Eleanor had mentioned she'd had to sell several assets in order to help them survive. Then within weeks, their financial situation took a 180. Suddenly they were buying an extravagant beach property, and travelling abroad. It all seemed too sudden to be logical, so Sarah couldn't help but ask her how her husband was doing. She remembered the look in Eleanor's eyes when she'd asked. She'd had a forced smile and a glint that was so unusual for her. She brushed her off with vague answers that never made much sense. Then there were the constant late-night calls that Eleanor would receive whenever they were together. Eleanor was usually a very open person and did not mind taking calls around friends. But these calls were different. She would get very agitated when she heard them ringing, and she would go to another room or outside, whispering while talking, and always hiding the conversation from everyone around her. Sarah had gotten curious a few times, but Eleanor always had an excuse. "It's a supplier for the auction," she had said once, when Sarah had asked her about it. Then she'd said it was her family in Europe another time, and so many different excuses that Sarah stopped asking, but remained curious. And finally, there was the way Richard acted around Eleanor. Always cold and detached, treating her more like a trophy than a wife. Sarah had always had the impression that Richard was uncomfortable around Eleanor. She didn't know why he didn't show any affection for her, but she always thought it had to do with his cold personality. Sarah now started to believe that something was very wrong in their relationship, and it was showing in very subtle ways. Sarah knew that none of those things made sense. She knew Eleanor was a successful woman with a successful husband. So why was she acting so strangely? Why did she look like she was hiding something? She'd started to see Eleanor as someone else, a woman she'd never truly met. She looked at her now as she gracefully moved through the guests, and she felt a growing sense of unease. It was like seeing her best friend through a thick sheet of glass. So close, yet so far. As the evening drew to a close, Sarah saw Eleanor slip away from the crowd, disappearing into a private room. Sarah, restless with this growing unease, followed quietly, a feeling like dread washing over her. She hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the door handle. She had never done this before. She had always trusted Eleanor unconditionally. But something inside her told her that she had to know. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open slightly, peering inside. She wasn't quite sure what she expected to see, but what was in front of her took her breath away. The room was dimly lit, with a single desk lamp illuminating a pile of papers on a desk. Eleanor was sitting on a chair in front of it, her face illuminated by the faint light. She was on the phone, and her voice was low, almost menacing. "And the money needs to be moved before tomorrow morning. Yes, all of it. Richard is getting suspicious. It's getting more difficult to keep him at bay," Eleanor hissed into the receiver, her voice harsh and unlike any that Sarah had ever heard. "I know what we agreed on, but if you make trouble, I will make sure that your life becomes a living hell. And don't mention that address to anyone, I repeat, anyone, or else." "You know what will happen," she said, with a tone that made Sarah freeze in her tracks. Sarah's heart pounded as she listened. She'd never seen this side of Eleanor before. The gentle philanthropist, the warm and loving friend, had been replaced by a cold, calculating woman. She could hear her heart thumping in her ears, the blood rushing to her face. She wanted to run out of the room, to pretend she never saw any of this. But there was another side of Sarah, one that hated liars and one that wouldn't turn a blind eye to injustice. She had to know more. Eleanor continued her conversation. "Yes, the art piece should bring in enough for this month, but we need to be careful. They are starting to notice the increase in bids. It needs to be more subtle next time." No, Richard didn't notice. "I think he believes all of this is charity money." Sarah could hardly breathe as she listened to Eleanor's words. Charity money, art pieces, what was she talking about? What did she mean by all of this? Sarah realized then that Eleanor was hiding something big and dark. As Eleanor hung up the phone, Sarah quickly backed away from the door. She needed time to process what she had just heard. It was like seeing a friend in a mirror that was warped and twisted, revealing a monster where she had once seen a friend. She barely made it to the bathroom when she broke down, tears streaming down her face. How could Eleanor do this? Who was she talking to? And what did her husband Richard have to do with it? She stayed there for what felt like hours. She washed her face and tried to control her emotions. She couldn't just burst out and accuse Eleanor. She needed more proof. And most of all, she needed a plan. She knew the truth was like a ticking time bomb, and she had to figure out what to do before it exploded and destroyed their lives, and probably more people's lives too. Sarah decided to play it cool for the rest of the night. She rejoined the party, forcing a smile and engaging in small talk. But inside, she was seething, her mind racing as she tried to piece together the puzzle. She watched Eleanor from afar and noticed the subtle mannerisms that she had previously overlooked. The way she avoided Richard's gaze, the way she quickly changed the conversation when someone asked about her finances, and her constant need to check her phone. Later that day, Sarah pretended everything was normal. She had brunch with Eleanor at their usual spot. Eleanor seemed unusually cheerful. She kept talking about the success of the auction and how much money she'd managed to raise for the community. Her words stung Sarah, as she knew that none of that money would go to the causes that Eleanor was pretending to support. The idea was so incredibly despicable that Sarah felt like throwing up at the table. "You know," Eleanor said, sipping her mimosa, "I'm so incredibly grateful for all you do for me. I don't know what I'd do without you." Sarah forced a smile back, a wave of nausea hitting her as she heard those words. Eleanor's words were like a knife to the gut, a painful reminder of her own betrayal. She knew she wasn't being truthful. Why did she have to lie to her best friend? Sarah felt like she was being held hostage by the lie. She just wanted to break the silence and tell Eleanor that she knew everything, but she resisted. She knew she couldn't confront Eleanor without more evidence. She knew Eleanor was smart and manipulative. She would probably be able to turn things around to her advantage. Sarah realized she had to be careful, play along until she had a solid plan, and then she would expose her to the world. That night, Sarah decided to do some digging. She went back to the art gallery that she owned with Eleanor's investment. She knew that Eleanor had several safe deposit boxes that were used to store expensive art pieces that were going to be showcased at future auctions. Sarah wanted to see what kind of items Eleanor was hiding, and if she could find anything else to prove her theory. She used a small key that she had taken from Eleanor's purse the other day to open the safe deposit box where she knew Eleanor kept the items. Inside, she found several original paintings and small sculptures, of course, but there was also a folder. Sarah took out the folder and slowly opened it. Inside were documents that detailed a complex web of shell companies, offshore bank accounts, and suspicious transactions. It was clear Eleanor and Richard were using the charity as a front to launder money from Richard's illegal business dealings. Sarah felt a chill running down her spine. This was bigger and more dangerous than she had originally thought. She then saw a document titled Operation Golden Goose. It was a detailed list of all of the actions Eleanor and Richard were planning to take in the following weeks. Sarah's eyes went wide as she scrolled through the document. There were plans to move assets out of the country, fake invoices, and even a plan to flee the country as soon as they managed to get enough money. But that wasn't all. Sarah kept reading, her eyes scanning the words with horror and disbelief. Then she saw a name written in big bold letters, Sarah. And below it, several notes about her, including the amount of shares that Eleanor owned on her art gallery. Then she understood. Eleanor had never wanted her as a friend. She never truly cared about Sarah's career. Eleanor was using her. She was using her gallery, her name, and the public's trust to launder money, hiding it in the form of art investments. The art pieces that she thought she had been selecting with such high standards were actually fake and inflated in value. Sarah felt sick, used and betrayed. She knew she had to act fast. If Eleanor's plan worked, she would not only ruin Sarah's life but that of countless other people who had given money to her charity, trusting her name and integrity. She looked at the documents, then looked around her, and started to form a plan. She wouldn't expose Eleanor on a whim or through a social media post. She wanted her to pay for her crimes in public, so that all of the people she hurt would see her for who she truly was. Sarah knew that Eleanor's next auction was in a few weeks. It would be the perfect place to reveal the truth. The problem was that Richard was becoming more and more suspicious, according to what Sarah read in the documents. They would probably do something to get rid of the evidence before the auction. So Sarah had to be swift and precise. She decided to call Jack, her longtime friend. Jack was a reporter for the local news channel. They hadn't spoken in months, but Sarah knew she could trust him. He had always been a good friend, and she knew that he hated injustice as much as she did. She called him, and they met at a small cafe that same night. She recounted everything and showed him the documents. Jack's face turned white as he listened to the whole story. "Sarah, this is huge, and this is the biggest scandal in Oakwood in a long time. And you're saying that Eleanor is behind it?" he asked her, still in disbelief. Sarah nodded. "I'm sure of it." "I have proof," she said, pointing at the documents on the table. Jack looked around nervously and lowered his voice. "Okay, what do you want to do?" he asked her. "I want you to help me reveal the truth at the next auction. I want the people of Oakwood to see who Eleanor really is. I want Richard to know that he's been played, and I want her to go to jail," Sarah said, her voice steady but with a hint of anger. Jack smiled. "I'm with you all the way, Sarah. Just tell me what you need me to do," he said. They spent the next few weeks planning their moves, making sure that nothing could go wrong. Jack and Sarah gathered all the evidence and spoke with several lawyers that agreed to help. They planned to have Jack reveal the scandal live at the next auction and to have the police waiting outside to arrest Eleanor and Richard. The night of the auction arrived like a tidal wave. The grand ballroom was once again filled with the same crowd, the same smiles, and the same fake conversations. Sarah moved through the crowd with a newfound sense of purpose. She knew she had to remain calm and act as if nothing was wrong, but inside she was trembling with anticipation and a touch of fear. She knew that this could be a very dangerous move. If Eleanor had any idea what she was planning, she might do something terrible. Eleanor approached her, her smile radiant. "Sarah, you look stunning tonight. Thank you again for all your support. I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, hugging her tightly. Sarah hugged her back, holding back her tears. "You're welcome, Eleanor," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. As the auction got started, Sarah gave Jack a signal. He moved to the side of the stage, his camera and microphone hidden behind a curtain. Eleanor started to present the items as usual, her voice captivating the audience. When she got to the main piece of the night, a sculpture that she had purchased at auction with the help of Sarah, she looked at Sarah, a smile playing on her lips. This amazing piece was found in the attic of one of my best friend's families. Her ancestors were well-known sculptors. You all know her and love her as much as I do. Sarah, thank you for the help, my dear friend, she said, while reaching for Sarah's hand and kissing it in front of the whole crowd. Sarah could have fainted. The humiliation she was feeling in that moment was immense, but she knew she had to stay strong. Her plan was almost about to be revealed. Then, as Eleanor was about to continue speaking, the lights went dim and a spotlight was aimed at the side of the stage. Jack's voice filled the room, his voice clear and resolute. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jack, a reporter for Channel 8. I'm here tonight to reveal a shocking truth about the Heart of Gold charity and its founder, Eleanor Vance. The crowd went silent. All eyes were on Jack, then turned to Eleanor. Sarah watched as Eleanor's perfect composure cracked, her smile faltering, her eyes wide with panic. For months, Eleanor Vance and her husband Richard have been using this charity to launder millions of dollars from their illegal business operations. Jack continued, his voice steady. We have gathered enough evidence to prove that they have created a complex web of shell companies, offshore bank accounts, and fake invoices. They have been using your generous donations to fund their extravagant lives. Jack then showed the documents Sarah had given him to the crowd. The noise of the crowd swelled and amplified. Eleanor's face turned red, and she looked at Sarah, her eyes blazing with fury. Richard was standing beside her, his face pale and his eyes wide with disbelief. Jack continued, but that's not all. They were also planning to flee the country as soon as they managed to get enough money. They were going to leave everyone they pretended to love behind. He then showed the document titled Operation Golden Goose, making sure that everyone in the room saw it. And if that wasn't enough, Eleanor even used her best friend Sarah, the owner of the beautiful art gallery that you all know and love, to inflate the price of the art pieces, hiding her illegal money into art investments. It turns out that those amazing pieces that you're all so excited to bid on are actually fakes that she bought on the black market, Jack said, pointing to the pieces that were going to be auctioned on that night. Sarah watched as all of the faces in the room turned to Eleanor, a mix of anger and disbelief filling their eyes. The crowd started to murmur, whispering furiously to each other, their eyes darting between Eleanor, Richard, and the documents projected on the wall. The police, who were stationed outside, entered the room and approached Richard and Eleanor. Eleanor Vance and Richard Vance, you are under arrest for fraud, money laundering and tax evasion, one of the police officers said, his voice loud and clear. Eleanor didn't move. She was frozen with shock, but Richard tried to make a run for it. However, the police were quick and handcuffed them. As Eleanor and Richard were led away, Sarah could feel the weight of the past few months lift off her shoulders. She looked around the room, seeing the faces of shock and betrayal. She knew that she had done the right thing, even if it had cost her her friendship. But in that moment, as she looked into the eyes of her best friend, she knew that Eleanor had never been her friend. She had always been a wolf in sheep's clothing. The fallout from Eleanor's betrayal was immense. The Oakwood community was shaken to its core, and the ripples of that night were felt for months. Sarah, despite the personal cost, had chosen integrity over loyalty. But the question remains, did she make the right choice? How would you have handled such a difficult situation? What would you have done if you had been in Sarah's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this story of friendship, betrayal, and justice compelling, please hit that subscribe button for more stories that explore the complexities of human nature.